Mindful Coach podcast. So, welcome to this edition of the Mindful Coach podcast. I'm your host, Brett Hill, and this is the show that you want to watch if you've been thinking about being a guest on a podcast or actually maybe even starting your own. Because I have with me Noemi Beres, who is a podcasting guru. She has the co-owner of the Podcast Connections booking agency. She helps entrepreneurs and business owners enrich their lives through connections, sharing their knowledge, and connecting them to quality podcast shows. In addition, Noemi is dedicated to helping experts grow their business with interviews. So she can help with, how do you do interviews as well. She started working in online marketing in 2007. She has a master's degree in Danish literature and language. She's a linguist, content creator, and quote, master organizer. And let me tell you, I know I could use some advice from somebody like that. In her free time, she makes hand-sewn collages, which you can see some of on our wall back there. And she loves playing a hang and frame drum. She loves playing drums recreationally. And she likes to walk a ton. And she lives in a beautiful area to do it too. So welcome to the show, Noemi. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Brett, for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure for me.
Where are you on the planet? Because I named a place where you live as a place to walk. So let's let people know about that.
It's Cyprus in the Eastern Mediterranean, and I always call it the Florida of Europe because we have a very nice climate here. So it's very mild, January and almost February.
It's lovely. So just for listeners, like what's the typical temperature out there in the winter time right now?
Let me check on my phone because I don't do Fahrenheit, but
no, that's okay. All right.
It's like evening time in January. Let's say in the winter, it's like 56 Fahrenheit and 60 something usually during the day. So, and it's very sunny.
So hard. I know it's like in the United States. The United States is where I'm from, and we have a very big range of weather. I grew up in the Midwest, and so we get ice storms and giant snow, and then in the summer it's 102 degrees, so we get extremes. And then in the Pacific Northwest, where I'm at now, it's like chill, like it ranged from like 32 to 85 and not much extreme weather in the middle. So it's all over the place. But
wow.
I love that you're in such a beautiful place, and that, walking can be a very rich experience. We could talk forever about the. Let's talk about what you do. So you have an interesting background with your degree, and then somehow you managed to pivot into podcasting and helping people get on shows and also produce shows that call to them. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brett, for this question. So I was born and raised in Hungary, in Central Europe. And as you said, I have a master's degree in Scandinavian linguistics, Scandinavian languages. And you know what? I couldn't really do much with that in Hungary when I got my degree. And that's why my late dad said, it's like, why you're not a lawyer or a doctor? Because I wanted to be a linguist. So that's it.
Right. So wait, before you move on from that, I want to know more about that. Like, what was it about that called you into investing so much of your energy and your time? And I'm not saying that was not a bad. I get interested in what lights people up, like what attracted that to you.
Yeah, I always loved languages. So since I was 7, I've been learning English. So my parents, paid for a lot of private tutors and everything. And when at age 16, it actually was my dad's fault that I ended up in Denmark as an exchange student.
At least we know who to blame, right?
Yeah, it was dad. It was dad all the way long because he found this program called AFS, American Field Service, in an exchange student program. And I applied and I got in. And so
I see.
Yeah, so I had two options. Either I could go to Denmark or to French Canada. And my mom told me, no, you're not traveling overseas, because that was pre-internet time, pre-mobile phone time.
Oh, I see.
So,
right.
There were only mails and everything.
Yeah,
so
and long distance calls, which were a hassle and expensive.
Expensive. Exactly, Brad. So I ended up in Denmark, and I went to a Danish school with only Danish pupils, Danish secondary school, or high school, as you call it in US, and stayed with a Danish family for 1 year. And so I learned Danish. So when I got back to Hungary, at age 17, I told my parents, okay, I have to continue this because I love the language. So I learned Danish and Swedish. And I also understand Norwegian because of the other two. So I loved it.
So
I
how
really
many
loved it.
languages do you speak?
A few. Hungarian, it's my mother tongue. English, yeah. Danish, Swedish, Spanish. And also I'm learning Greek, Irish at the
Oh
moment.
my.
And I also learned Latin, French, and German at school, but I
When you
don't
say
use those
Irish, you mean
anymore.
Irish or like Gaelic or what are you
Gaelic
using?
Irish, yeah,
Yeah.
Gaelic Irish,
Yeah.
but from Ireland. So Irish, yeah, Irish, yeah. Don't ask me, Brett, why I do that, because I love learning
Don't
languages that
ask me
I.
why.
Don't ask me why. And actually, I started to learn Navajo too. You know, the Native American language. You can do
That's a
that on
very difficult
Duolingo.
language, I understand.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's really interesting.
oh,
So I'm a nerd.
wow.
I'm a language nerd. So that's
I
me.
love that. I love that so much because there are things that you can learn from languages that you can't learn any other way.
Yes.
And one of the things, my son was fascinated with the culture of Japan ever since he was a little
Oh
boy
yeah, I
and
love
saw.
that too.
And
Me too.
yeah, and he actually majored in Japanese, and so
Wow.
he was always telling me about these nuances in
Mm,
Japanese and in other languages. And one of the things that they have, which I think is so interesting, is that, and I'm sure you're more of an expert on this than I am, is that in a culture there are words to describe things that are valuable to the culture. So
yes.
in English, we're kind of thin on a lot of things. It's a good technical language, but
Yeah.
like there's no word for something like my best friend's girlfriend,
Yeah.
you know. But in Japanese, there are words for those kinds of things,
Wow.
and they're words that describe very, very complex relationships,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I just really appreciate that those things actually have names. And wouldn't it be great if we had names for things like that too?
Yes.
And and it's also interesting because that becomes a part of your mindset, the
Mm,
fact that those what does that mean then about how people value and perceive and evaluate all kinds of things, from decisions about relationships to business, because it just becomes a part of your neural processing. Anyway, we
yes.
could talk about this forever. We're way off
Probably
field
we
from
could do
talking,
that.
but it is about language, So here you are. So you've got this big framework for language. You're fascinated by it. And so now you're in a different, business world. So how did that
Yeah.
transition come around?
So ended up after I finished my university degree, I got my master's degree, and couldn't really find any job. But luckily, in Ireland, they were looking for Danish speakers and Swedish speakers. So I applied for a couple of jobs, and I got accepted everywhere because Irish people, they don't really speak other languages other than English.
Yeah, right. You
So
got accepted everywhere.
yes, so that was good. So I ended up working in a call center for an American company's call center in Ireland, on the east coast of Ireland, and it was a great experience. I was young. I moved there with my husband. We had
Sure.
fun, and there were a lot of young people from all over Europe speaking different languages. So it wasn't like your typical call centric vibe that you get like 100 people
No,
squeezed
I
into an
mean,
office.
Ireland is a big hub. There's a lot going on
It
in
is,
Ireland these
yeah.
days. Yeah.
PayPal, I think there's so many companies out there. So it was fun for 3 years. But then I said to my husband, I can't do this anymore. I want to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know anything about it. I had no entrepreneur in my family,
Wow.
but
But you
somehow
were
I
done with I'm getting going up and showing to work in somebody else's business. You wanted your own thing.
exactly. Yeah. And I wanted to do things differently because the leadership
Hmm.
wasn't top notch where I worked for the company. I
Oh,
just
imagine that. Huh.
I'm not going to name the company, but you can
No,
look.
no, but I've never heard that before from like 10,000 people,
Right,
you know.
right. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I decided, okay, so if I want a business, I want to do this differently, and I don't want to have these, very boring meetings every Monday. And let's. I want
Right.
to be an entrepreneur. So we ended up in the online travel industry, and
Mm.
we were the first car hire brokers for Hungarian customers who traveled
Oh,
abroad.
wow. Car rental in Hungary. Oh,
Yeah, but
wow.
we worked online. So basically, that was before everybody started to work remotely. I started working remotely back in 2007. So when the pandemic hit and everybody complained about, oh my gosh, I had to work remotely. So I've been doing this since
She's like,
2007.
yay, we can work remotely. Yeah.
I've been doing this forever. So, and
Right.
it's fun. So I always enjoyed it. I was an only child. So for me, working from a home office was a joy because I really enjoy like being alone. That's kind of this my lone wolf mentality. I love networking
Mm,
with people, but I also love, just being my own boss. I mean, that was
yeah.
wonderful. And I was a travel writer, blogger, social media marketing content organizer for the company. I was wearing too many hats, as we all do when we are solopreneurs. So, and that was going very well until 2020 when the pandemic hit. And so everything
Nobody
that
was
was
going anywhere anymore.
nobody was going anywhere, and we were told that like, oh, just 2 weeks, and everything is going back to
2 weeks,
normal
right? It'll be
here in
over in a couple of
Cyprus,
weeks.
and then ended up with 2 years. So obviously everything stopped. That was travel related, car hire related, and that was it. So we had to pivot. We had to figure out basically to pay the bills because everybody asking me the same question when I'm on a podcast. So how did you do that? Like, was podcast booking agency your dream job? It's like, no, I didn't even listen to podcasts before 2020, to be honest with you. So I had,
Right. No,
so
what are you talking about? Somebody
what are
else's
you talking
dream.
about? So when my husband came up with this idea, thanks to our mentor, to an Irish gentleman, and so he said, "Okay, so we're starting a podcast booking agency." It's like, what's that? Like, what are we going to do? And but I knew that we have to pay the bills, our son's tuition,
Yeah,
which is expensive, and okay, let's do it. I didn't care because I was always that type, like, okay, let's do it. I can learn as we go. I can learn along the way. I know I can
sure.
do it. So we
Yeah.
just jumped in from one day to another. We created a website. We still have that website for the company. Maybe we need to change that, but it's working.
Maybe I
So
should go back and edit that a little bit.
and so that was it. We started the whole thing in 2020, and first we started to work with e-commerce experts, female entrepreneurs only. But then we expanded, and we have all different kinds of clients from across the globe,
So
mainly
how do
from
you like
US.
it?
Love it, because my job is all about networking, about connecting with people and connecting people with each other across the globe. So it's so much
Mm,
fun to be this kind of online matchmaker service, like B2B business, and reaching lives through connections. I think it's just amazing because it's just not
yeah.
about just placing people on podcasts, but helping them to be open, to be vulnerable on these shows, and to share their
Mm.
messages, share their stories. I think this is so
Now you're
important.
speaking my language. That I love it so much. It's like yes, because it's really becomes it's more than just a business. It's a mission, right?
Yes, it
I
is a
love
mission.
it.
And I'm also part of, I don't know if you ever heard about him, but I always do a shout out on podcast wherever I go. Bob Berg and John David Mann's book, The Go Giver. And I truly believe in that if we give to people, we get that back 100 times because
Yeah,
we are for the clients and the clients are not for us. And that's my
yeah.
purpose in business and my goal, to give to people. And when I give to people, I will get everything back.
I love that so much. I was just in a little webinar yesterday. Richard Tobinger, who started the Conscious Marketing Organization, he does all the online media for Eckhart Tolle, Gaber Mate,
Mm.
Sounds True, all the kind of the really
Ah,
big names in the
love everyone from the
mindfulness
list.
kind of
Yeah,
industry. I just love his stuff. And his whole thing is like marketing as a spiritual calling. And what he means is like, you feel in your heart you have something to offer to the world. You owe it to the world to market what you have so that you're not withholding your stuff from the people who need it. And he gets really intense with it, but it's extremely valuable message. And it's very similar to what you're saying. It's like in your own calling. I'm in the business of podcasting and helping people become guests and also start shows, but then also really it's about connection and vulnerability. And isn't that what we need more of in the world?
absolutely, Brad. We need it, really need it all the time, and especially right now.
So let's talk a little bit about what it is that you do in terms of like, okay, so someone picks up the phone and well, let's talk about this. What would be the value to, let's say, the listeners out there, because many of them are entrepreneurs or solopreneurs and they're coaches and they're going, I'm trying to get traction. Nobody knows what I do. I don't know how to get the word out. What do you tell people? Do you have hope for people like that?
Absolutely. Podcast guesting is probably the newest marketing strategy in the market right now. It's been around for a while, but it's still not as popular as like doing Instagram or Facebook ads or other different promotions. But it's a long-term marketing strategy. And as everything else, if you do it consistently and persistently and you get into the habit to at least to do 2 shows per month, which is not it's
Hmm.
not a lot, you can start to build up your authority. You can build to promote your business, also part of being a podcast guest, building your authority, building your brand, and people will notice you. If they Google your name, you will come up everywhere. And they will think it's like, oh my gosh, this person is, I can see her, him, them everywhere online. So they must do something right. It's a it,
Hmm.
and also credibility, because nowadays business world is so hard for people to trust you because there's so many businesses out there, fake, good ones, bad ones. So you really find it's really hard to find the good ones amongst all of that chaos it's in the
Well,
business
that's
world.
really important. That's really
Yes,
important because it is really hard to stand. I call it standing out in the noise, right? It's
absolutely.
because the
Yes,
internet is such a insanely noisy place.
yes,
It's This is me going off on a rant. I'm really tired of trying to find, the the instruction manual for the one thing that I need, and it's like you have to sort through 3,000 fake websites to get to the finally
yeah.
you find the one. It's like crazy just to find, actual useful stuff. And so in the world of posers, how do they find the real deal, right?
Yes,
And
the
so, yeah,
gems.
so being on these podcasts, it also gives people a chance to kind of hear you and see if they're simpatico because, they're
Yeah,
judging you. People are judging you. It's like, I like this guy or like this girl and or not, right? Based on your age, race, temperament, everything. You can't help but make I align with this or not. And you want to be able to find your people. And the only way they can
absolutely.
do that is if you're out there, right?
Yes, if you show your face and you start sharing this message, sharing your story, because the more and more open and more vulnerable you are, people will align with your message so much easier because they see that you are a real person, not just
Yeah.
someone who wants to sell something, but you're a real person. And that I think that comes to social media too. So when you share all these episodes, when you are a guest, you just show people how I'm same as you. When of course we can do business together, but they trust you, they know you trust you better if you really show your face and not just something, a fake mask
Well,
during
right.
those
Like, be
conversations.
authentic, right? We're talking about
Absolutely, it's
authenticity.
all about
Yeah.
authenticity. Yes.
Mhm. So what do you say to somebody who says, well, I hear you and that sounds good, but I don't know what my story or my message is.
Yeah, that's why you need sometimes podcast booking agencies to help you out there to craft that message. But of course, you can, if you want, you need to craft that message and condense your story. You have to go through, you have to really think about what your business about if you are a coach. So who am I helping? And it's all about them. It's not about me. It's all always about them, about the client, about the customers. How can I help them? And incorporate that in your message, incorporate that in your story, because that's really, really important.
Do you help people figure that out?
Yes, we do. We do. We have a 1 hour strategy call. Whomever signs up with us, we always spend an hour with them to go through their bios, their topics, their talking points, just deeply, deeply, dig into their past and their business, who their ideal client is. Just really important to understand. But if you do that all by yourself, you can do that too. You just have to go through every single steps, and then you will figure out, yeah, this is my niche. And you have to find your niche, and that also means that you have to listen to podcasts, a few episodes, and go on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, or YouTube. There's so many places.
So let's talk a little bit about what you said. You have to find your niche. And there's so many coaches out there who say, well, what I do doesn't have a niche. It's just like I'm just helpful. And, so what do you say to somebody who there's real resistance to kind of naming a niche because it feels that in and of itself can feel kind of inauthentic because I'm not really trying to help just this particular small group of people. I'm really trying to help a broader group of people. So it can feel like I'm not really like being real when I say this is who I'm after or this is what it serves. I have something to say about that, but I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah. For me, it's like, if you think about it, you definitely have like a broader topic that you talk about. Like, it can be, spirituality, it can be marketing, it can be sales, whatever your coaching niche is. There's a broader space that you have to focus on. So if I were you, if I were a coach, I would pick a few podcasts that align with my message and start to listen to those. Plus, when you do that, for example, Apple Podcasts will give you other podcasts, they pop up so you can see what else is on the market in that niche. Also,
Mm-hmm.
try to check listennotes.com. Listennotes.com is a
Mm-hmm.
great space where you can just put something in marketing, sales, spirituality, and podcasts will pop up. So you can see who is in that niche, who is in my niche, whose audience is the best for my business or best for, for what I'm going to tell them. So I think these are practical tips that you can use when you look for something. And because of the AI, it's just amazing how much like ChatGPT can help us. So basically, if you type in your like, I'm coaching in this and that, I have these type of clients, then it will give you just a coaching niche or whatever, even podcast, because now ChatGPT does search when you work with it. It's just amazing. It's mind blowing. It can help you so much, and we do that too in business. So yeah.
That sounds like a great service to just to be able to help people clarify,
Yeah.
that. So yeah, so good. I really appreciate that. I like to tell coaches who ask me this question, because, and I speak from my own experience, right? Because I have a very broad skill set because of my background. And so whenever I think about, well, who do I want to pitch to, which, to use marketing terms, there's some definite reasons for that. And you kind of just go into a little bit of a marketing riff. The key thing here is that, like, if you're dealing with a situation where there's just a lot of noise out there, and why is someone on the internet to begin with, on the web, and what's going to light them up, what's going to grab their attention? Because as you well know, all the headlines and all the titles these days are all SEO packed. It's like 7 ways to crush
Yes,
your
everything.
opposition. It's kind of like that.
Yes,
That's all
yes.
straight SEO stuff, because some research that says if you put a number in the headline that you get 12% more clicks or something. And because of that research, every single thing has a number in the headline. And so it's like stuff like that, which kind of drives me crazy, because the actual headline I want is the beauty of the moment, and that's what I want. It has nothing to do with 7 ways to appreciate nature. It's not. So I really don't like that about the
Yeah,
fact
but
that
it still works sometimes.
yeah, but the thing is, it works to get people to look at your
Attention.
stuff, and
Yeah,
and it doesn't help if you're writing for a bookshelf. That's one thing, or just for yourself, that's one thing. But if you actually want people to open stuff and read it, you have to do some compromising about the medium that we're using, or you have to choose to not use that medium. You have to do something
exactly.
different.
So true. And just a little secret. So if you're just starting out, check your competition too. And sometimes there are, different coaches, they are already on podcast. Maybe they made a media page where they include their podcast guest appearances. Try to check those, because that's a huge help. So you can see where the competition is going, what podcast they are visiting or, guesting on. And
Yeah.
it's a huge help. Some people, they do that now. And I also advise for my clients. So, just set up a media page on your website so you can show people what kind of podcast you were a guest on. But it's
That's
also
a
a
good idea.
good thing to
Brett
do. Yeah.
will launch media page this week. I need one. I don't have one, but that's a really good idea. So there you go, folks. That's tip number 1 for the Mindful Coach podcast today. Open a media page.
And tell to the host as well, because they love it, because you link back to their website, to their podcast, and just tell them,
Yes.
like, yeah, sending a thank you note when you finish your interview. I always do that after every single interview. That's like, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. And you can tell them, yeah, I will share the content once it's live. And also that when it's live, I'm going to put that on my media page, so you get a link.
Yeah,
And
yeah. So the hosts love that too, right?
Mm.
So you're going to put this interview on your media page, is what I'm
Right.
hearing.
Yes. Yeah. And there's another. Like, I have this. I could talk about this for hours. Like, you can set up a Spotify list with all of your podcast appearances. Once
Oh,
the
is that
podcast
right?
is I mean, the podcast is on Spotify. You just look for it for your specific interview, and then you can arrange it in order, in date, time, whatever order, and you make that Spotify list public, and then you can share that on your maybe on your media page, or you can share it with when you guesting. You can check out my previous podcast appearances if you want to see where I was
Right.
a
It's
guest
like a
on.
playlist of your
Exactly. Yeah.
guest appearances. I've
Yeah.
been on like 30 or 40 podcasts. I should do
Yeah.
that. That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Wow. See, we're getting so much value today in the Mindful Coach podcast about this interview. This is really practical advice. So I want to come back one more time to finish this thought about niching. And because I have that resistance to like, well, I'm going to do this, but that's not really who I am. I'm really bigger than that. And so the problem is that any niche doesn't feel like you fit in the box. And so here's my thought trick for decompressing that anxiety is that think about yourself as a novelist or a director of movies. You don't try to make every story you have in one film, and you don't try to write every book you're going to write in one book. So if I'm going to write a book on East Coast civilizations, I'm going to write a book on East Coast civilization, but I'm actually interested in civilization all over North America or Canada, or well, North America is Canada, or Europe. And so wherever I look, I see a bigger world than this particular book, but the scope of my work might have several volumes, or several films. And the same thing with a coach. I can focus on, I'm going to do mindful communications. I'm going to do coach training. I'm going to do working in interviews and one-on-one dialogues. Each one of these being kind of a volume or in my library of books. That's the way I think about it. It's like, okay, just pick, this is just your first book. And that way I don't have to try to put everything into one statement, And so if you're a coach and you're looking for what do I pitch, it's kind of like, what's your best value that you bring to people who have the most suffering? That's a strange way to put it, but it's kind of like, if you help people calm down, then stress and anxiety is your thing. If you have an affinity for helping women who've been through divorce and are now struggling, then that's a very strong niche to be in, even though you may have other skills. So that's my wrap.
I love it. Thank you for that.
Hey, you're welcome. Yes, just invite me into your. I'll come and talk to your people anytime. Oh wait, you're the guest. I'm sorry, I forgot for a second. So you have. What would you say then to coaches who, if they wanted to? Okay, so we've talked about they've got to get their story. And so we know about onboarding a little bit with them. Do they need to have something that they can ask people on at the end of the show? Get a host will often say, how can people connect with you and that kind of thing? What do they need to have put together so that they can make those podcasts actually connect to their business in a way that actually pays off?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. And actually, nobody asked me that question before, Brett. So that's a great one. So try to pick maybe one social media place that you are active on. And you don't have to tell everything. So X, Instagram, Facebook. So it's just too overwhelming. So maybe pick your website and pick one social media channel that you are frequently on. And that's your main gem. And so when people ask you that question, so yes, please visit our website. And I always tell that too, that I'm really active on LinkedIn and I love it because I think it's a great platform. It brings a lot of business in and you can share your podcast interview. So I always tell them, so please visit my LinkedIn page, your name. And after that, please get in touch with me. And sometimes people and coaches, they don't have a specific call to action or something they want to offer. And so many times they ask me, so what should I tell them at the end of the interview? Because I don't have a book, I don't have a landing page, I don't have anything. I would tell them, you know what? Tell that you are on LinkedIn, for example. And if they want something, they can just connect with you and start a relationship with you and start talking to you, jump on a call. What I advise not to do, because it used to work, but not really anymore, the discovery calls. Because people try to, send people to maybe their landing page and just to jump on a sales call, basically. And that's not really appealing. That's really pushy. And people don't like that anymore. And I heard that from many podcast hosts. They don't even allow you to ask people to let's jump on a call and let's have a sales call or pre-call or something like that. They don't like that. So they prefer if you share your website and one or two significant social media channels that you are on. And I think that's a great way. I love simplicity above everything else. So, and people will align with that better. Plus, there are so many people listening to podcast interviews and not watching them or checking their phones. So if you just tell their name, they are on the phone, they can just type in your name and they will find you straight away. So they don't have to go back to everything and find you because, they just don't pay attention to many things nowadays. So try
Right.
to be as simple as possible to get
Yeah.
your contact details through
So
the
that's really powerful. And one of the things about that, like you said, if they can, is to do that for yourself. Like go to Google, type in your name and see what happens, right? And you want to, I put a lot of work into being able to be discoverable. And so it's like, that's something you might want to think about. And one of the things you can do to do that is what they call anchor content. So on your website, if you have a document or a particular on your pitch, right, on your, I should say in your niche,
right.
Write something that is core to your main message about who you are, what you do, and how you help. Put that out there, and then that becomes either a Google Doc or something that can be discoverable that you can send to people when they ask about your work, or you can link to it so that people can, find out about you.
Yes.
Another interesting thing that people don't know on LinkedIn is that you can have a newsletter. And
yes.
And I was typing in like some stuff and I saw my newsletter on LinkedIn, like on Google. And I'm going, oh, Google is offering this topic. And this, I didn't do anything except post the newsletter. And Google evidently likes LinkedIn newsletters and will surface them. So you might want to think about that as a way to reach people too. And you can link to that from anywhere without having to have a website.
It's very powerful. It's very powerful. And the good thing about the newsletter is that I've seen this with other podcast guests and hosts, that once your interview went live, you can turn these interviews, thanks to ChatGPT, again, into newsletters. So basically, you to take the transcript from YouTube or wherever it is, put it into ChatGPT and it will create or just a basic newsletter. And then, of course, you can change it around, make it a bit more exciting to sound it more like you, not just very ChatGPT-ish, AI-ish. And then off you go. Content is king, and you create so much evergreen, important content through podcast guesting, and you can just put that into a newsletter, and it's amazing.
That's really a master stroke advice there, and I can recommend that too. Like you take the transcript of anything you do. I've written blog posts and articles this way where I don't want to write them, so I'll just sit in front of my podcast platform or Zoom or something, record. I'll just riff on it because that's just a skill I have, because I've been in, I grew up in theater and I've just been in stages forever, so I can just stand up and just speak on. You give me a topic, I don't really have to know much about it. I can still talk about it, and for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then that turns into a transcript, which I throw into ChatGPT and say, make an article. The other thing I've done with ChatGPT, which I can recognize, this is taking a turn into the ChatGPT advice I didn't expect.
Fan club.
Is I posted some articles that I've written from my blog post, and I've got half a book written. I post that up there too. And I said, I don't want you to do anything with these. I just want you to use them as a reference for my style. And then I say, now take this transcript, turn it into a blog post using my style. And it'll do a pretty decent job.
Yeah.
I have to go through and remove the weirdness because it always throws in weirdness.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but what is it about ChatGPT that loves the word delve?
Delve into something.
I know, it's like crazy. Anytime I say, write me 10 bullet points, and it says delve into the whatever, I'm going, and I literally have to say, do not use the word delve.
I did that too. Yeah, I did that too. So please don't, because everybody knows straight away this was ChatGPT all the way long.
It's like all over the internet now. Delve into it. It's like crazy.
But at least we use this word, so it's a rebirth for the delve.
Well, yeah, nobody uses that in English.
Nobody uses it anymore.
It's one of those words, immerse, delve. It's like those. It's overused by the ChatGPT engine. Anyway, we're having some fun with this, but let's talk for a moment now about if we've been talking about being a guest. And if someone wanted to, but there are some people out there who might actually be interested in starting a podcast.
Yeah.
And what would you say to someone who came to you and said, well, I think I want to start a show? What do I have to have together just to kind of get started? Because I think people think it's harder than it is. And I want to be clear,
It is.
to go from zero to like really a big show is a big deal. But there are a lot of valuable shows that are small. The Mindful Coach podcast, I consider it a small show. I put a lot of work into it, but I don't script it, and I don't have segments, and I don't have sound effects, and a lot of stuff going on that
Yeah.
can do. And so
I'm,
people
I'm
might think that it's harder than it is.
It's a great question because I just started co-hosting a podcast last year. So yes, why did I do that? It's the same. Again, find your niche, find your topics that you want to cover and what you're passionate about. Not just because, I want customers or I want this or that. Of course, it can be part of your business plan, and it's a great plan. Like yesterday, I was on a podcast, not on a podcast. I was on a podcast, but we didn't talk about that. But I had a networking call, and it was amazing because she's a lady, she helps people basically how to do this, so how to make money. And she advised me to start a podcast and also use it as a tool for your own business. Do some ads for your own business, offer your service promote your business during the interview. And also, if you are a coach and if you want to get more business out of your podcast, then start inviting potential clients on your show. Not just because you want to sell them something, but you just start out with a friendly conversation with them to get to know each other, to start a conversation going. And I have a great podcast host friend from the UK. He's a top notch e-com expert. And he told me that, when I wanted to work with my client, or just like I wanted to invite a few people, and I've just really wanted them on my show, and it worked well. And I asked them, it's like, can you be a guest on my show? But if you just went to them and I just wanted to have a discovery call, a conversation on Zoom, they didn't want to do that. But getting on a show, it's all about their ego, because everybody loves talking about themselves. And so it's like, if you want potential clients, get them on your show and then start a conversation, start networking with them. And
yeah, that's true. I have found that in my show, this particular show, I've done like 3 podcasts. This is my 3rd one. And there are many people who are willing to say yes to being on your show. And it's really cool because it's becomes an issue of finding the right guest rather than who am I going to find. And so that's where a service like yours can be valuable, because you can match guests to the best shows for them and up level, because you can spend a lot of time guesting on shows that aren't going to help your business.
Yes.
And so I get a lot of people pitching me on, I want to be a guest because I teach, how to help people how to run better and diet better. And I've got nothing against that, but it's not my thing, and my audience is not my niche. And I'm going, do they even know what I do? So if I was to pick up the phone and say, or pick up the phone, if I was to reach out to them and go, hey, you want to be a guest? They would say yes. So it's easy to find guests when you're a host of a show, but it's harder to find great guests. And so that's where a service like yours can be really valuable, I think. So and so also starting out, like you say, you've got to have a voice, you have to have a point of view, right? That's one of the key things, is you need a point of view, at least in my opinion. Now, I'm an older guy, and I kind of like have a particular mindset, and I see a lot of podcasts that are kind of like, whatever's happening, look, a bird flew by. I like birds. Do you like birds? It's kind of like, a stream of consciousness rather than taking a position on stuff. And they're very some of those are very popular. So
they are.
I'm confused, so I'm just doing what I'm doing, and I'm imagining that there's big value for other people as well. So I guess my question would be like, what would you say to someone then who wants to get started and they think they have something to offer? It's almost like the same question, like, what's my coaching niche, right? But they feel a little uncomfortable about being the host of a show.
It is, because, for example, I just thinking about my case, I was doing a lot of guesting, but being on the other side of the mic, a host, it's a completely different experience, and you can't wing it. You need to prepare. Because I heard that like some podcast hosts, it's like, yeah, as you said, let's just talk about this or that. No, I mean, it needs to be an order. You need to prepare for the show. And I think it's really important that even if you are a host, I would advise to listen to at one episode of your guests, because you learn so much about them before the
Hmm.
interview. I really don't like those questions when they ask me, okay, tell your horse story, who you are, what are you doing? And it's like, yeah, but that's like, you did your research. So you need to know a couple of things about me in order to start that conversation. So it's just about preparing. I think that's really important. So I was on a show, and there was probably the best experience for me. And this is a shout out to John Hewlin. He's a great podcast host, and he did like a 2-page research about me. He knew that I love
Wow.
taking photos. He knew that I'm doing art. I love traveling and languages, and he just came so fully prepared. So I think that's one of the key things if you want to be a great podcast host. The other thing that I have to emphasize, yeah, being a good listener, because some podcast
Yes.
hosts, they love to hear their own voices, and they can't really find the
I don't know
sweet
anybody like
spot.
that. I don't know. Who could that be?
You're not. No, you're not. I was on a
Oh,
show, but
thank you.
the
Really
host talked
kind of you.
about 80%, and I was just sitting there and like, okay, should I interrupt the host
Should I
or
like
not?
speak up? I don't know. Why am I
Or
here?
maybe not. Maybe I'm just sitting here and I'm gonna listen to them.
Oh, I know. It's horrible. I have been a guest on some bad hosted podcasts, and they didn't know who I was or why I was there, even. And you know that's true because the first thing they say is like you mentioned, it's like, well, tell us who you are and why, what you're about,
I
as if
know.
they had never met you before. And you're just a person walking in the room, and it's kind of like, okay, why are you applying for this job? And it's kind of like they don't know you from anybody.
Yeah.
And they didn't read your bio. They don't know what you're about. Well, I'm a coach in mindfulness. Oh, mindfulness. Well, that's important. And like, okay, so you've given us like zero thought,
Yes.
and I don't appreciate that because and I'm going, does anybody like listen to this? Do they like this? And the other thing that, but since I'm on a rant about things I don't like don't be this guy if you're going to host. Don't be the guy who has a series of questions, and no matter what the guest says, you're just going through the questions.
Yes.
There's no connection there. It's
No.
just a pro forma. Oh, well, did you? It's almost like, applying for, you go to a medical doctor, you have to check, did you have ever had tuberculosis? Have you ever had surgery? So, and I'm talking about, well, my strawberries just aren't growing this year. And did you have surgery ever? And it's kind of like they're not even paying attention to what
No.
you're
No, they
saying.
don't pay
They're
attention.
just
Yeah.
going to go to the next question. And
Yeah.
it feels so disconnected and inauthentic.
Yeah. Yes.
That I just wonder, what's the value of this? I've been on some mindful podcasts that were like that, and I don't get it. But that's just me, I guess, because they were popular shows.
I feel the same way. I think it's all about like a friendly, free flow conversation between two people who are like almost friends, or just over a cup of coffee or tea or something. I think it's really important. The tone of the whole conversation is just so, so important. And people will tune in because they like that vibe, not just next question, next question. It's just not giving
Yeah.
back that experience to the client, to the audience.
Well, right. It's kind of like you want to kind of model, particularly in my business, because I'm doing mindful communications as one of my things. I try to model in a certain way without being crazy about it, rapport, authenticity,
Yeah.
connection, trust, and all that kind of. So would you say we're connecting here? Is this a connected conversation?
We are definitely connected. I mean, this is a free flow, very friendly conversation with laughter and joy. So, yes, absolutely.
Yay. Mission accomplished, right? And see how
Yay.
easy that was. Yeah, but I often say my job is really easy because in the world that I work in mindful authenticity, mindful coaching, mindful communications, the people who show up are just so, I'm just going to use the word luscious because it's such a rich experience for me to meet people like you who are doing fabulous work in the world, who are heart-centered, intelligent, creative, passionate, who want to do good in the world and are making a stand in their life to make that happen. It's not just an idea, it's you're actually putting yourself into your mission. And that it's so critical. And if I have a mission, it's to help people like that, because what else can we do in the world but help each other be successful? I said this yesterday in my podcast, which is I want to live in a world where we have each other's backs instead of being each other's throats. And
that's beautiful.
And I just really, really, truly mean that. And so I just want to say thank you, Noemi, for being here. And like, what would you say to people who are listening to this and going, I think maybe I want to check out being on a podcast? How would you tell them to begin? And I know one of them is reaching out to you. So how can people find you?
You can visit our website, which is podcastconnections, plural.co.com. That's our website. You can visit us there, and you can have a chat with us, a friendly chat. No pressure. And you can always find me on LinkedIn. You type my name in, Noemi Beres, and there's a little microphone sign next to my name, and you will find me there, and just connect with me and have a chat with me.
And you said you have a podcast going now.
Yes, it's a bit different. It's not business related. It's more like spirituality, mindfulness. So I might invite you, Brad. So I might invite you. I would love to interview you, Brad, on that show. It's called The Sacred Divine. And
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. Yes. I'm happy you're doing that. That's like a big deal for me, but this show isn't about that. Yesterday I kind of went there, but today I'm not going to, even though it's really where I live.
Beautiful. So that's the show. That's the show I've been doing since last year.
Well, so people should check it out too, because that's going to inform all of your work. And and I love that very much. And so I guess I just want to say thank you so much for showing up and being here. I will link to all of your good stuff in the show notes, so people should definitely check it out. And also, reach out to me if you're interested in terms of like how can you show up more authentically in your own online presentation. I'm also a technologist, and I got the high-end technology and the camera that moves and all of that, and it's not moving right this second. But if you're interested in how to put all this together, I have some things to say about that. I should probably create an episode on how to do it. And the Mindful Coach Association, which you can join for free at the mindfulcoachassociation.com. List your services as a coach and get listed on the directory. Come to the community meetings, meet incredible, amazing people. Noemi, you should probably be there too, because it's such a great resource for coaches. And we also have service providers in there as well. So it's an amazing resource for people who are trying to do great work in the world. And so that's it for me, Brett Hill, the Mindful Coach. Check out the website, themindfulcoach.com, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care now. Okay. The Mindful Coach Podcast is a service of the Mindful Coach Association.